Well, welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us on the last session of the day. I see some familiar faces. I know you guys came to see Mike. We had a great session prior, so hopefully if you missed it, you can see it online later. My name is Luis Camino. I'm a technical product marketing manager. I'm joined by Mike Carter.
And I'm a program manager on the CRM product team. And I'll talk more about that when I'm done. Right?
And I also serve as his bodyguard.
All right. I'll be up in about halfway through to do some configuration demos, and I'll let Luis get started.
Thank you, sir. All right, so with that, let's get started. I know you guys want to go into happy hour soon, but what I figured we'd cover today really quickly, we're actually trying out this Bing Pulse, so in your spare time, if you guys don't mind voting for some, or answering some questions there, we really would appreciate it. We're going to do, again, an overview, and I say again because we did it in our last session, of Microsoft Dynamics, but diving a little bit deeper into some topics. We're going to do demo again because it's better to show than to tell. I'll kind of go over some functionality, and Mr. Mike here will do the deconstruction of that demo to show you how the magic happened. And of course, we have to talk about the future and some Q&A. So with that, 4 words that I love for you guys to take away at the end of this session: simple, familiar, immersive, and powerful. They will make a lot more sense at the end of this session, but keep these in mind. So, Microsoft Dynamics. Some people ask me what it is. Some people don't know, if it's business solutions, if it's a cloud. Well, this kind of represents a very nice Microsoft picture of what we offer you guys. We have individual productivity with Office. We have business solutions with Microsoft Dynamics, and we'll dive into what those are shortly. And of course, the Microsoft Azure Cloud. Under business solutions, ERP and customer engagement. Under customer engagement, this is where you'll find our sales, our service, our marketing, our social solutions, and the platform, and that's why we're here. We refer to this as XRM, and XRM is really what we leverage for building line of business applications. Some business activities of companies today, and I promise you I will not kill you with PowerPoint. I have a few more slides. Business activities of companies today, the ones highlighted in blue: marketing, service, sales. Well, we have CRM for that, Dynamic CRM. But what about line of business activities of companies today that require solutions, right? The first one that comes to mind is relationship management. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, maybe I am in the line of business of managing donors. We actually wrote an application that manages that we'll show you. What about agents, volunteers, partners, vendors, you name it? As long as it's a relationship, the XRM platform will support you. What about interaction tracking? Right? You're managing the relationships. How are you now keeping track of all the touch points, all the, say, reminders or tasks or things that actually relate to the entities you're actually managing? And last but not least, line of business management, right? If you're in the property industry, if you're in the services industry, you want to manage buildings, well, you came to the right place. I'm going to talk a little bit about this slide. So we decided to build in probably a day or so a given campaign, right? And we started out saying, okay, well, what if I was to build a line of business application that managed my donors? What would we want in this application? Well, we would want it to be themed, right? We want it to look like our brand, right? Our corporate colors, perhaps, right? We want it to be personalized, right? So that the end users actually are able to customize it to their needs, look at their data, their dashboards, etc. You need it to be configurable so that it's easier on the business analyst or business super user, as I call them, to configure it for the end user. It needed to be social and collaborative because, well, why not? Mobile ready for the people that are always on the go. So we needed a solution for that. Search, we often forget that we put a lot of data into systems and then we're struggling to get it out. So search or finding things, something that came top of the list here. It needed to be secure, and of course, it needed to include analytical capabilities so that when we actually retrieve data on it, we can do some analysis. Okay, so what did we do? And this is what we'll cover in the next demo segment. We're going to go over theming, we're going to go over personalization, the navigation of the system, because it's important, right? It needs to be familiar to your end users, it needs to be consistent. Visualizations are important. Search, of course, Office 365 integration. Mobility and integrations. We'll show you how we built an application that actually allowed us to have UI mashups and social collaboration embedded right in between, in it. All leveraging Microsoft Dynamics CRM underlying platform called XRM. So with that, let's get started. So what I'm showing you here, and I apologize ahead of time for the people that saw a little bit of this in our last session. I'm not going to go through the entire thing. There's going to be new stuff, but bear with me here. So this is our giving campaign event dashboard. And what you're seeing in here is simply a dashboard for me to monitor my money raised, because it is a giving campaign management system. In here, we decided to show some social monitoring or from our social engagement tool, part of Microsoft Dynamics. But that's not what I want to show you right now. This is the first landing page. We said, let's talk about theming. We needed the theme. We needed it to look like, we needed to use the Microsoft Ignite logo in this beautiful orange that we picked. Okay, so if your company decided to skin or theme your application, how would you actually do that with the current tools out there? I'll show you what we can do. Simply by saying, I'm going to go to Settings on my application, go to Customizations, and go to Themes. And what I want to show you is how powerful this little feature is, because I can actually create multiple themes, skin them the way I want, add different logos for different themes, try things out, and actually preview them, right? But how long would this take if I didn't have the tools such as this? I'm going to change a color here. I changed basically the navigation bar color. And I'm going to show you just with a click preview button what that actually is going to look like. And hopefully there we go. So now I changed that, right? Very subtle, right? You're like, okay, great, Louis. Okay, you changed the color. Okay, but yes, the beauty of this is that I didn't need to go figure out how to do this in a style sheet, bring it in. I use an editor, right? A designer. Now, let's talk about personalization. So as an end user, yes, I'm an admin of this system, but I'm also an end user. I want to actually customize some of these settings for me, right? If my application, most line of business applications, may actually make use of currencies, right? Numbers. You need formats, right? You need localization, right? Okay, so all I have to do is, for me, because we in Microsoft Dynamics support over 48 languages last time I checked, Mike, right? Maybe, I think we're running out of languages we support. All I can simply come in here and say, you know what, my formats are going to be this based on this certain locale that I'm in. Just like that. For me, right? The system actually, when you set it up, it's actually going to say, oh, are you in the US? Okay. Do you want to use dollars? Okay, great. So you're going to use this locale. That's at the system level. But I'm showing you, if I happen to be in Spain, that I can actually configure my user experience just by going in here and changing it because I was a Spaniard and I lived in Madrid. And just like that. Simple. Okay, let's go through some other subtleties, right? But it helps people with really using a system. Let's go back, if I can. Wait, I'm sorry, my resolution here is interesting. I'll refresh. I see I added my mugshot. Subtle things, right? But I can actually empower users to personalize their applications so they end up using it, right? Utilization of your systems are important. We can personalize that. Now let's talk about navigation and visualizations. How easy would it be? How many have actually, from a developer perspective, if we have any developers here, tried to build a hierarchical visual representation of data? How many people have tried to actually do that? Thank you. I actually tried as well. It was a really interesting experience that took me days. Okay. Well, what if I was to tell you that when you build a line of business application with these tools, what I'm showing you right now, it's a list of fictitious Microsoft employees. And let's just say that I wanted to represent a hierarchy that I configured for these Microsoft employees. So what you're seeing now is we grabbed the donors and we said, we're going to form a hierarchy. And what you're seeing now is a hierarchical visual representation of your data, but before we clap, this actually has some important things I want to point out. There are calculated fields, there are roll-up fields built into this visualization that I didn't write a single line of code for. I configured it. And so what you're seeing for, let's just grab an example, Mr. Richard Dickinson. These two fields here, values, are actually roll-ups of the people underneath him. But let's not stop there. Richard reports to Param, and the roll-ups keep going automatically for you. Oh, but let's not stop there. Param reports to Jujar. So now I can talk to Jujar and say, why did your team only donated or contributed $17,000? Aren't they Microsoft employees? Okay. Just like that. All through designers. Let's go through something that we introduced on Monday, which is a new navigation scheme. So we heard the feedback. For those of you who have been following us for a while, you had to actually scroll and scroll and scroll. Now you have navigation, better navigation in above the fold. We have recent records that your line of business application can actually leverage out of the box, right? We talked about search, didn't we? We talked about how important is it that, okay, I enter information into my forms, I can see them in views, I can write queries for them, but what if I had built in, out of the box, global search capabilities, where I basically just said, let's search for Mike. Mark, are you here? Yeah. We added Mike, and Mike actually was found to be a donor. Thank you, Mike. And you donated an autographed football of I don't know who, and you played catch with Russell Wilson. That's great. I don't know how you did that, but that's awesome. All right. Search. Easy as that. Let's talk about, and I previewed this earlier, so for those that attended, please forgive me. I'm going to try to go easy on that. So Office 365, we had a session on CRM and Office 365. That type of integration, right? The OneNote, the Excel, something that we released as well earlier, the Office 365 groups for contextual collaboration across entity records, right? So if this giving campaign actually has a Office 365 group that I created a calendar for, I had conversations for, I have documents for, I actually have a team that collaborates on this giving campaign event that I'm managing on this line of business application. And it's not limited because of Office 365 capability of being able to invite people from the outside of your organization. You now have collaboration from your line of business application, just like that. From a mobility perspective, I often lose Wi-Fi for some reason. I do not know why. So imagine that because I'm using OneNote, I'm always working on the giving campaign OneNote on my laptop, on my tablet. I didn't go up to my line of business application, but I used OneNote. That stayed as part of my line of business application, and I'm able to reference it later or share it with somebody else. And last but not least, what I want to show you is the UI mashup and integration capabilities that we offer you out of the box. What you're seeing here is a couple of things. Native charts built into the product. Of course, community with Yammer, some system posts, embedded web resources, HTML files, right, where we basically grabbed Microsoft Social Engagement's Ignite handler, and this is what that's what currently is happening out on the social sphere. And we decided to do that pulse and actually embed it here, just in an iframe. So I hope this gives you an idea of how easy it would be to build a line of business application for your company, for your organization, for your users to use. Simply, powerful, immersive, and familiar with the products you already use. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Mike so he can actually give you the deconstruction mode on how to build this line of business application. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Luis. So with that, let's move slightly forward. So Luis talked about the experience of using the application, the business application that we built here. And really all this is a customized system on top of the same platform that CRM runs on. Luis touched on that, but sales, service, marketing, XRM, if you hear the XRM term thrown out there, all that really means it's the underlying platform that CRM runs on today. So if you're customizing your sales system or service or marketing, you're developing something on the XRM platform. So sometimes that's usually the first thing that people ask is, what is this XRM thing? And it's more about a name as anything, because it's the same platform that you know when you're developing your sales, service, and marketing solutions. So it's mobile, it's social, it provides insights, all built on the same familiar platform that you know today, and you get the same experience to build out maybe a completely unrelated application. Luis touched on donations, industry, facility management. There are many, many solutions that you can build. And when you take a look at it from the broader perspective of the business application development platform, it gives you many of the core capabilities that we use to build the sales, service, and marketing capabilities. So if we start here and we kind of walk through what are the capabilities here, and this is just mostly a laundry list. I'll dive into a few of these, kind of show them in the application or in the customization in the UI, and give you kind of a taste. I'm not going to be able to go too deeply into anything because it's a big product. We can go through a lot of things. First, we have the model-driven design. It all starts with the entities, and I'll show you what you get just by creating an entity and all of the powerful capabilities that come just from creating an entity. With that, alongside of it, you get built-in robust security. There's ownership, there's teams, there's business units. All of these are more of an ownership, firm ownership, whether it's, it's the team or the unit itself, or there's sharing. There's very rich sharing support, either intentional, I share this with you, or you're on my sales team, and we have team selling, where you can pick for each individual row, each individual opportunity. I could have a unique team that this opportunity is shared to, and you could have every single opportunity shared with a different set of people. That team essentially has a lifespan that goes along with the opportunity, and you can add and remove people from it. You've got the business rules designer. This is about being able to build workflows. It's about being able to build business rules, logic that runs in the background without you having to write a single line of code. I'll show that a little bit, but that's very powerful, and that's really about taking and designing the solution that you need without having to write code. Writing code when you need to and not all the time. So at the same time, there are core plugins and that you'll need to write code for, but it shouldn't be the first thing that you need to do. You shouldn't have to go write code just to be able to get some business rules running. Processes, workflow, and automation. I'll show this just a little bit, I think. This is about getting a process to run in the background the asynchronous processes, and being able to fire these based on various conditions. Access anywhere. So we talked about the mobile, right? Being able to access your application from a mobile device, from the tablet application. You could access it from Outlook client. Having various clients that you can access your application from. It's multi-language. So we talked about the 44, 48, how many ever languages. It changes all the time. It's hard for me to even keep up. We may even be over 50 at this point. But we are extremely multi-language supporting at this time. Collaboration, communication, so we touched on that with the SharePoint integration. All of this is just done by configuring your entities for it, and it comes essentially for free. It's a configuration experience versus a coding experience. We showed the hierarchical visualizations and the calculated fields and search, offline, localization. I don't want to kind of harp on this too much because I think I'll show you a demo real quick that'll go much deeper on this. The core point being that you get a lot out of the box without having to actually build it yourself and code it yourself. But at the same time, if you do need to code it, we give you the inroads there so that you can kind of plug in your own code and run it when you need to. So the next phase here, kind of in the life cycle, is integrate. So nobody's in a homogeneous environment. Everybody has to get their business applications to work with the rest of their environment. So we are able to integrate with the rest of your ecosystem in your company. The standards-based OData, this is a big push for us. So we're, with this latest release, we're kind of taking a stepping stones forward on having a fully fleshed out OData endpoint. We already have one today, but it's it has a certain subset of capabilities that we offer, data query and that kind of thing, with the kind of the roadmap on that is to be fully capable. Every single thing that you can do in the SDK, you should be able to do through the OData endpoint, or very near to that. And the only things that you wouldn't be able to do would be maybe things that are much lower usage and not super common. Mashup ready, that's client-side mashups, the ability to bring in your application into our client, being able to bring pieces of our application experience into your client. Standards-based authentication, OAuth was a big push for us recently, the ability for you to have a single sign-on or using the OAuth protocol, the ability to sign in once, have that credential saved, and you don't have to sign in again across multiple devices. Bulk data API and the import, bringing data into CRM when you need to, getting in there more rapidly in this most recent release, which I should pause, by the way, and actually talk about it. This is a big week for us. The spring update actually just is available to CRM Online, is available starting Monday, starting 2 days ago, and it has many, many improvements, particularly in integration. So if you have updates to make, reducing the number of round trips that you need to make, the ability for you to do optimistic concurrency. So has somebody gone in and updated my record while I've been viewing it, and can I do a check of that while you're doing that? You could integrate that into your own form applications. And making sure that we're kind of fitting into your ecosystem better through some integration improvements. And that OData endpoint improvement that I mentioned is actually in preview mode in this spring release. So I encourage you, if you're a current user and you've kind of got a system and you kind of want to bring it forward, take a look at it in the new release. Take a look at that endpoint. We're really open to feedback on that. That's one of the most interesting things that I think we've done with this release, is giving you something for preview. It may change. It may be heavily different than what it is today. But you can go take a look at our OData direction just by looking at it in the current web API. Provide the feedback and get that into the product. It's very, very good opportunity for you. And then the mobile SDK, the last thing on my list here. There we're talking about the ability for you to build your own mobile clients. And we have an SDK that you can use for that. We have a client SDK also for web application. Basically, we give you the tools that you need so that you can build the applications from the client all the way through to the server. And I'll go a little bit into the manage. Primarily, the manage is about, okay, I've got an application deployed. How do I keep it up? How do I manage the solution and make sure that my users of it are actually getting their job done and are productive? So we have a central management portal, which I'll show. We have solution versioning. A lot of forward steps there on the solution front, the ability for you to keep track of what version of components are in the system, how have they changed recently. We give you sandbox environments, so you don't have to do all of your development in a production environment. You can use the sandbox to do your development and then bring it forward to production when you're ready and when the actual application is ready and not before. So for data management, data access and management API, we give you the ability to actually integrate with your data the way you want to. So PowerShell and that for Office 365 particularly, they have their own API. We have our API for managing the metadata that's in the system. We call the metadata, it's basically all of your configurations are the metadata. It's scalable, maintainable, deploy once, and hopefully things are going well. You don't have to maintain it too much. But if you do, we give you the tools to allow you to actually maintain it yourself. You have a question, sir? So the question is, do we have multiple APIs? So yeah, we have the traditional SOAP or kind of traditional API that we've had before. That's about being able to manage the data that you're accessing in the system as well as the metadata, which is the configuration of the system. So this is more leaning towards the management. There would be you could basically change or add a field to an entity or change something about an entity. That's the traditional API. That, for example, is a good example of something that you can't do in the existing OData endpoint, but you will be able to do with the fully fleshed out OData endpoint that we're looking at in the future. So it's a good example of something that we haven't been able to do in the past, but will be able to do in the new web API. So this isn't meant to be a full integration talk. I could spend a whole hour and a half just talking about the integration work that we have coming. I'm going to kind of give you a more high-level overview here and not like a deep dive on integration. It's safe to say, though, that there's a lot of improvements coming in, or that came, I should say. I've been talking about it being in the future for so long. It's actually out now. So the spring release is available today, and you will get scheduled. If you have a CRM Online deployment, you will get scheduled at some point in the near future. It's basically the process that we run. That's the upgradable on your terms aspect of this. We don't force you to do an upgrade anymore. We did a few releases ago, but now you have the power to choose when you are ready. We will not upgrade you unless you sign off. You essentially have to approve it. You can reschedule based on the windows that are available. You could go through and select that. I don't want it to be 90 days from now, which is usually what you would see as your window. I want it to be only a week or two from now. And then when you approve it, you can get scheduled, and then you can get yourself updated and actually start moving forward with the new release. And you can choose to do that on a sandbox instance, for example, if you own them. before you do that to production, which is a really good thing to do, particularly to make sure that the new release isn't going to have a severe impact on you based on your workflow or anything about it. And you can assess the new release without having to do it in production first. All right, so with that, let's do a demo. Let me get my machine up and alive here. And I think yes. Okay. So this is the Office 365 portal. You may be super aware of this. You may know and love this. If you own CRM, we are one of the many services that you can see here. If you want to get to the CRM portal, under Admin here, we have a CRM option. So if you were to click that, I kind of shortened the flow here a little bit. This is in our tenant for the GivingCampaign solution. We've got multiple instances. Some we're using for testing, some we're using for production. Ignore the Azure test or Marketplace test for the example here. That could just be something that is a departmental, some other department's using that. You don't even have maybe any idea what they're using it for. The GivingCampaign has a production instance. That's the main instance that you might be using for running the production. In this case, because we were so close to the release, we built the demo for today in a preview instance because it was the one that we were able to actually upgrade to this new release at the time that we were building the demo. But we also have sandbox instances, a dev instance, UAT. You can use them for training, basically anything that you would like to use them for, and you can actually control how they're used, when they're rolled into production. Just to kind of show this real quick. So right now, if you were to do a reset, and you should see the same thing if you were to look at your sandboxes. If you would like to start trying this new release, you could take one of your sandbox instances and reset it. This is if you're okay with deleting everything that's in it today, because that's exactly what will happen. You could go to CRM Online 2015 Update 1. That's the name of this new release. That's just newly available this week. And that will give you a fresh, clean instance. It's as if it was just provisioned from scratch, like you just bought a new one. And that would give you the ability to basically try out the new capabilities. And that assumes you have a sandbox instance available for this. The other instances, or the other versions here, that's the update from last fall. So that's what the 2015 update is. The bottom one is our spring release. We still have customers on the spring. This kind of shows a little bit about that power of choice. Our spring 2014 release is still running it online. We have customers who have decided not to upgrade to either the fall release or now they have the opportunity with the spring release to make an update. We will also give them at some point in the near future, I don't know if it's out there just yet, the ability to skip a release. So you could, if you're starting at the spring 2014, you don't have to say, I want to upgrade to the fall release and then upgrade to update 1. You can say, I want to go directly from spring 2014 to update 1, and you take care of all of the difficulty of getting me there. So that is something that we're supporting. I believe it was already out there for this release, but if not, it's coming very, very soon. All right, so let's jump right into of course, because I was letting it sitting there for a while, then we had a gateway timeout. Ignore that. But this is the same dashboard that Luis was showing. Let's jump into some customization. So the scenario here, what I'm looking at is we've got this GivingCampaign, and let's navigate around, by the way, while I'm talking. So we built the solution. In that solution, we have an application that the company can use to keep track of donations, to keep track of donors, keep track of the money that's coming in for the donation, and a little bit of the competitive spirit. Internally at Microsoft, we're very giving focused, particularly at the executive level. They like to kind of hold that over each other and say, hey, my group's better than your group when it comes to giving. But one thing that they're noticing is there's a lot of donations, because there's just, such a competition. Lots of donations, but they may not be paying as quickly as they would like. So they bought the item at an auction, a charity auction, let's say. So they bid $10,000 for something, but then they're having a hard time keeping up with the getting the money from the donor and getting them actually to pay up for the donations that they've made. So there's a couple ways we could solve this. The simplest way is using a new capability that we have in Advanced Find. So let me jump over to, this is an easy way, by the way, in the nav bar here, there's a button for Advanced Find. Now you can jump straight to it. So if I was to, my mouse is actually not here. So if I go to donations, and under donations, we're just going to use created on to be when the actual time that the person bought this for the purposes of this. When they created it, there's a new set of operators here. The older than X minutes down to older than X years. Recently, up until this release, we only had older than X months. That was the only operator that we offered for older than for a date. Now we offer older than X minutes, hours, days, weeks, and years are the kind of the new operators that you have available to you. This is available via Fetch XML, which is our query language, as well as obviously directly here in Advanced Find. The particular interesting scenario here, minutes and hours and that aren't necessarily as interesting as far as paid goes. I'm going to focus on days, let's say. But for minutes, it's really interesting for case aging. So if you have a case that's been open for a certain number of minutes and you would like to be able to say, show me all hot cases that have been open for more than 15 minutes, let's say, and you want to use that as an exception type of situation where, hey, you know, these are these cases that are still active and somebody hasn't picked them up yet, but they're hot and we need to get on the ball. That wasn't a capability that we had before, was to craft that exact query using this operator in the past. So it's a new set of operators, so just kind of a minor improvement overall, but it kind of brings us into some new scenarios that we didn't have before. So in this case, I'm going to select older than X days. Oh, sorry. Oops. Next. Older than X days, and let's choose 14. All right, so in this case, because I'm running in a test application, none of these people have paid. I mean, what's going on? I mean, we create this test application and people actually aren't even going out and paying for anything. And so this is a good way to kind of get a visibility into it, but how about while you're using the application? So this is the form that you'll see when you bring up a particular donation. So it has information on the item itself. Over there at the left is autographed football. It's been signed by the entire Seahawks team. The donor info is up here towards the middle and the top. We've got the who gave the item up for donation. And then at the bottom, we have who bid on it. And it was me. And I bid $200 and I haven't paid. So some other interesting part of this is that this is actually a fully customized business process flow at the top. So we're currently in the collect stage, right? We had to create a new auction item, then we were at the auction, the stage, and then we went into the collect and then follow up. Right now we're, we need to collect. We could have for example, there's a workflow that could fire on notify winner. You set that to yes, you save the record, and it'll go out and actually send an email to the winner to say, hey, what's going on? What's the deal? Why haven't you paid? So let's use some of the new capabilities to basically expand the form a little bit and now have more information about whether or not somebody is late while they're looking at the form. So the first thing I'm going to do here is go into the solution. And so this is the customization tools window. It's scoped down just to the solution that we're building here. So this only has components that are in the Giving Campaign solution. So if I was to expand entities, I can see donation. So it'll load the entity form here, and let's zoom in a little bit on some of these capabilities. So this is the entity definition. This is an entity that I built for this. I'm sure you're probably aware. If you've used CRM and done some customization in the past, you'll be aware of this. Areas display of this entity is interesting. This only shows event management, workplace, and settings. That's because we've edited the sitemap. There's an internal concept of sitemap. That's what actually drives the tabs that you see. So if I was, for example, to go show you, that's this. So event management, workplace, and settings. You pick where do I want this entity to live in this navigation UI. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Where is my window? There it is. Sorry about that. All right. So in the rest of the form, we have essentially checkboxes for enabling many other communication, collaboration, data services type of capabilities, activity tracking, the SharePoint integration. All of that is enabled by essentially just checking a box. You could have document management, OneNote. We already showed the OneNote integration. It's just a checkbox that you turn on. You decide that you would like to do it. It's here. I mentioned access teams. So this is the ability to essentially say, these are the people this is shared to based on an individual row. We don't have access teams enabled here, but we could just by checking a box. The data services options here, these are more core kind of platform capabilities. Quick Create is up in the nav bar. You could click a Quick Create button, and that's only the minimum amount of information that you would need essentially to create this entity record. And duplicate detection, you can enable or disable. That would tell you whether or not you have duplicate records out there. Auditing is disabled by default in systems, but you could choose whether or not you want to opt in for auditing. It has a slight impact on the system, but it's still there for you to kind of keep track of things, especially if you're a financial services or any sort of enterprise that wants to keep track of what people are doing with their data. And then that bottom change tracking, that's another integration feature that we've added for this spring release. That's the ability for you to, if you want to integrate data with an external system, right? Like you've got maybe a BI server that you want to bring data out to, you could run some SDK requests and say, just give me the changes. And if you enable this, you can then keep providing what amounts to a timestamp token and say, okay, give me all changes since this time. And it would do deletions as well as creates and updates, all returned to you via the change tracking API. We've got some client integration at the bottom here. The particularly interesting piece is if you want to show this in the mobile application, you can control that here. You could say enable for mobile. Do I want to show this in any form of experience in the mobile application? Do I want it to be read-only in mobile? So I can control what experience you actually have with it in that mobile device. And then we have help there at the bottom. So what I really want to do now is I want to add two things. First is a calculated field that shows how long has it been since the person who did the bidding actually bid on this item. So I'll call that days since donation, and what I really want to do here is go to fields, create a new field. Oops. So days since donation. And we'll just call that a whole number. And this is how you choose whether or not you want a field to be simple, calculated, or roll-up. Calculated means that within the boundaries of this particular row, I want to do some logic, I want to do some conditionals, I want to do some data manipulation, and then I want to maybe do an assignment. And I'll show a little bit of that in a second. Or do I want it to be a roll-up, where it's basically taking, based on relationships, bringing data? It could be hierarchical, could be not. You could be just having a roll-up of my children, and then that's all that you want to roll up. But for the calculated field for here, we're just going to do a very simple calculated field. And then I'll save it. And then this is the calculated field editor. So we could do conditionals. Here, the interesting thing is, let's say that we wanted to say, first we have to pick the, where is it, current? Current, it's right there at the top. So if we want to say whether or not it's paid, so let's say, first of all, it has to be where paid equals no. Then let's add a, so this is part of the new capabilities that we added, is the ability to do date diff in a calculated field. So now you can do diff in days, diff in hours. Here I can zoom in a little bit to make that clearer. So you could do essentially date diffs in the various granularities. It's very similar to like the older than that we did. This is kind of like the same thing, just on the date diff side. So let's say that we want to do diff in days, and then do create. Oops, I must have typed in that in wrong. It has like IntelliSense style. So let's do created on, and then this is the between. So created on, it's the date diff in days between the created on value and now. Oh, sorry, did I do R? Thanks. And if it, yep. So then if it accepts it, that means it's at least going to try it'll work. So if I do save and close now, and then I'll save this. And then let's do another field, and let's show whether or not this person is actually late. So late, 2 options, calculated, edit. Let's save that first. Sometimes it doesn't want to come up there. All right. Okay, so if I say that if day since donation, which is the field that we just created, if that is greater than 14, then add an action so that late is value is equal to a yes. Otherwise, oops. Late is equal to a no. All right, and if I did that right, all right, so now I added a field that this is just a Boolean just to show you whether or not somebody is currently considered late. Has it been more than 14 days since they made a donation, and are they currently not showing that they've paid? So one thing I need to do now is to go to the form definition for this, and I need to add the 2 fields that we just added. So if I go there to the bidder info, so first I can add days since donation. The next I can add late. So I just hit the save and close. And let's publish those customizations. And now this should pretty well just light up in the solution. I have to get myself refreshed. Here we go. If we go over to donations. Watch this. I clicked too many things too quickly. All right. So if I pick this one, play catch with Russell Wilson. It's thinking. It's a lot of business logic. Come on. Come on. Luis, did you do something?
I believe it's your Wi-Fi.
I have a wired connection right now, so. Somebody want to ask a question while I'm? Uh-huh. Yeah, well, typically with intermittent performance issues, it is because you have to go over a shared network, right? So there's a good point there of how do we get you from your local area network to CRM Online faster, right? So let's just say that for sake of argument, this case, it's not like the server is seeing too much drain or something. Sometimes it could be network related. And so we have what's called the Microsoft Edge kind of network. And this is not something that you need to do anything about. There's absolutely nothing for you to do to adopt it. What we are doing is to make worldwide latencies as good as possible, right? There's always going to be a speed of light issue here. We're creating these edge networks that are distributed throughout the United States, throughout Europe, and they with the effort of getting you to a dedicated network as close to you as possible. So it should come to your company, let's say, then your local ISP, and then they can get a very quick network connection directly to the Microsoft, that's why we call it the edge, because it gives that faster connection. So that's one thing. Server intermittent performance issues is a little bit more difficult. It depends on maybe what you're doing or something, but I'm not actually placing any blame. It's sometimes quirky things happen, but usually we see the little bit of the intermittent issues are much more on the latency side. Like if you were to keep a ping history over time, you'll have these big spikes in the amount of ping that you get from your local network to CRM. To our servers. And so that's the first thing that we're looking at. The general, are we seeing customers with server-side intermittent issues? That's something that we just work on a regular basis to deal with server-side. So typically that shouldn't be, quote-unquote, your fault, right? Because there's nothing that you can really do about it. It's something for us to maintain consistent performance as much as possible. In this case, because I was loading the form, that's a good example of something that is going to be heavily latency kind of dependent, right? It's how much we have to bring down. We actually made it a lot better in this spring release. The speed of loading, that's one thing I haven't mentioned. The speed of loading the form, you should notice it's greatly reduced over what it's been in the traditional. And this was not a great demo for it because like when you saw it said loading business logic and something, that's not something we did in previous releases. Like we didn't break it down into different stages. So what we've done, we've kind of pulled apart the loading pipeline and made as many things as we can not depend on one another, right? Like so that instead of being completely serialized, we now try to do things at the time that we need to. It's still in some form serialized, but really when it comes down to it, we want to give you a read experience first and then an editing experience as quickly as we possibly can. All right, so I went down the rabbit hole a little bit on your question, but that was all good things that you set me up for, so I wanted to talk about it. Huh, okay. That's interesting. So up until recently, well, recently being a couple years ago, we didn't work in any browsers other than IE, right? We had that release where we said, now finally you can use us in multiple releases. We try to keep them all equally as working, right? So there is never we try to be Microsoft first, right? So IE may get only this much more love, but it's only because we're, Microsoft shipping Microsoft products. But we still use, obviously like this, I still use Chrome probably just as much as I use IE. Why do we break one instead of the other? I can't answer that question, but fundamentally it's about, we try to be as cross-browser aware as possible. Right? So. Well, I could definitely say that wasn't intentional, so it'd just be good to bring that feedback back to the team, and if there's a particular component that's in the out-of-box system that you're finding worked one way or another, just bring that feedback to us. Go out to Connect if you have any feedback for the team, and that's definitely something we look at on a regular basis. So while we were talking about this, we did have success, right? So this is the woohoo, it worked. Days since donation, thank you. Days since donation is 140, so I want to talk a little bit about where that's calculated and when. That is calculated server-side, right? So it's something that you bring down in an SDK request, meaning that it's not stored somewhere, but it will be calculated as you're bringing the value down. So you would get 140 if you request the row via the SDK. But if it was something that, in this case, it's not I guess I could update paid. If I update paid, then we should see, and so this is the interesting challenge here of we should see that go to yes. And then I should be able to see days since donation and no. So it does update at client side as well. So that was the only point I wanted to make there. So the days since donation went to 0, even though that's probably just I misnamed that myself. That's days since donation when you haven't paid. And the late means that no, we're not late. So it does client side as well as server side. Question, sir? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Do they show up on the filter views? I think the answer to that is yes. I believe the answer is that is yes. They are all SQL Server side. I do know that. We're just using actually SQL Server components on the back end to actually do this calculation. So it's not happening in our business layer. Actually, it's happening all the way up at the top of the stack, or I should say at the bottom of the stack, down in SQL level. So as far as I know, don't come back and hold me to this, I believe it's exposed just as any other field, right? You should be able to see it everywhere where you could see other fields. Yes, question? So are you saying, can you see the calculated fields when?
No, like any places when I'm customizing the form, is there opportunity for a customizer, like to write my own logic?
Sure. So the broad answer is yes, you could integrate JavaScript, your own custom JavaScript into the various events that we fire in the form. Maybe not complete absolutely everywhere, but it's kind of like there is a surface area on which you could use our client SDK. People do it all the time. They essentially customize the form incredibly. And typically, this is a good example of something that people have used client-side customizations for in the past. They would build their own JavaScript to basically do a calculation based on the values in the form, maybe after the form loads. So part of that's going to be up to you. Part of that's going to be based on the server, like the CORS whole cross-site scripting kind of thing. Well, client-side, because it's running on your client, it's the same protection that you get for any other JavaScript, really. Server-side, if you have a plugin in online, it runs in what we call the sandbox. That's where we protect other consumers, other server-side consumers from each other, right? So like your different hosts, that kind of thing, so they don't have cross issues. But as a client-side configuration, there's part of it's just up to you, whatever you want to do with your JavaScript, because it's running on your local client. Part of it's going to be just things that are within the bounds of what you can do with JavaScript, right? So. So server-side, the way plugins are run is you have a plugin registration tool. You register it on some event in the pipeline. If it's on update, if it's on retrieve, if it's, where do you want this to happen? And the plugin itself is run in a sandbox that is basically boxed off. That's kind of what you were alluding to, is that you can't run certain code from a sandbox. But for example, you could do an external retrieve of some data as part of the data pipeline if you want. But execute a HTTP GET from some other resource. That is definitely something that you can do. Yes. Yep. It's an extremely common scenario, actually, that we do see that all the time. And that's one of those things about where if for example, I showed you your sandbox environments for the front end, the full sandbox instance, one thing that we try to make sure that people don't run into is the situation where they've copied a sandbox instance and they have the same external integration points in both of those systems. They start using the sandbox instance, and it's making updates to that external system. So that's something we try to make people aware of, and you have to go fix that yourself, essentially, if you want to essentially kind of tie that off or some form of sandboxing yourself to make that work. So, any other questions before I move on? No? Good. So it's 5:58. So I'm going to show you one other quick thing. I'll make this fairly quick, and then we'll open things up for full-on questions. So in the fields, so this should be on donors. So donor is a lot like a contact, right? That's a person. It's the person who is actually doing the donation. One of the things that we've done recently is recently meaning it just was released on Monday, is the ability to have somebody's birthday not be treated the same as the rest of the dates in the system. So we have now what's called, user local. This is the same date and time that you've always had in the system. And what user local means is that it's always converted to your local time zone when you retrieve it, no matter where you are. It's converted to a common UTC time zone in the database, but everybody, when they retrieve it in their local time zone. So if a worldwide deployment, everybody sees the value. It's a single point in time at that same relative time throughout the world. But what if you wanted to have a birthday where my birthday is August 22nd, no matter where I am in the world, it's still August 22nd. Now, the actual moment in time when I was born may be more appropriate for user local so that we can represent that at 5 in the morning. What time was that anywhere else? But the date itself should be a date-only value. And so both date-only and time zone independent, they're similar in that date-only is do not do any time zone conversion, just save the date and retrieve the date and treat it like it's a date. So even though if you're to look at this in the SDK, it would still have a time portion. That time portion is always going to be 12 midnight. And also when we treat it in the advanced find or fetch, when you query on this, it's going to treat it like it's a full day versus the actual 12 a.m. So if it's like, if you're saying before or after this day, it would be before or after 11:59 on this day instead of before or after 12 midnight of when it started at that day. So it's maybe a small situation or issue with some, but now this is something that we've actually addressed. The bottom item here is time zone independent. So it's a date and time value. It has a time component, but similar to the date only, there's no time zone conversion. It's always going to be the same value for everyone who views this around the world. And there could be many scenarios. One of the common scenarios that we use for that is if you wanted to do a check-in time at a hotel and you wanted to have that same check-in time throughout the world where it's 3 p.m. And if I saw that value in Kuala Lumpur, I want them to see 3 p.m. or whatever it is, the same as I do. So I won't go too much into that. That's mostly just once I set it as date only, then the format is hard-coded to date only. Format being what you see in the client, it's always going to be date only. You can't update it. And then no matter who views it, they're going to always see the same date value. Pretty common request and something that we wanted to make sure got out there in the spring release. All right, with that, where am I? All right, so to summarize, we've got this nice chevroning up here at the top where we talk about entities, the process, the business rules, the workflow, custom code, forms, and finished application. These are all the pieces that as you kind of move from the left to the right here, you're building out your application. And you could you can go through this flow typically without having to drop into the custom code as much as you used to. That's usually the way we kind of look at it. Like every time we kind of look at a feature, we want to see how can we either make your custom code more productive or make it so you don't need to write custom code at all. And that's where the calculative fields, the roll-ups, the hierarchical modeling, all of that feeds into reducing your need for custom code. So we also have all of our clients. We showed those. We showed the web client as the top 2 boxes. We've got the mobile client. Then we've even got a phone client. They all are consistent. They're familiar editing experience to design that form. When you design a form, you could design it to appear in the web client. It would look very similar in the mobile client. And then the core structure of it would look similar in the form with the phone. Like what do I want to show? What do I not want to show? Kind of high level, having a model-driven, extensible RAPL application development platform. It's open.NET, right? So making sure that if you know how to develop in Visual Studio, you're familiar with it, and it's the same consistent experience that you have when you're developing your .NET code elsewhere. We have the Microsoft Cloud. We're running in the same data centers as Azure, not on the same resources, but in the same general data center, in the same data center itself. And the lower total cost of ownership is kind of the key here, making it so you don't have to host this yourself, and that it's something that we host for you and reduce the amount of resources that you need in order to spin up a business application. So let's talk about the road ahead. So I was going to spend a little bit more time on this. I want to leave some time at the end for questions, but I want to talk about 3 main points for our future roadmap. And this future roadmap is kind of from now on through the end of the year. And I'm going to stay very high level because I don't want my bosses coming back saying, what the heck did you guarantee at Ignite? None of this is guaranteed. But XRM is the heart of our business application platform, right? Taking a look at XRM as a platform that can run any arbitrary application, taking a look at the experience, taking a look at the core foundation of how it runs. You're going to see some interesting things coming from us by the end of the year, right? And so that's kind of just one kind of vague kind of thing I'll just throw out there, is that XRM's getting a lot of love. The next is search, right? So some of the most consistent feedback that I've been hearing, by the way, I own a lot of the modeling tools that we showed here. I own the query, and as well as I own search. So this is near and dear, particularly to my heart, of building out a fully fleshed out search solution. So instead of using what we call quick find in the application, which is what Luis showed, have something that supports a rich ecosystem of search capabilities, and having the first time that we'll publish an actual public search API. Today you can't actually integrate search into your applications unless you dig through our SDK and find some of the internal things that we've exposed for it. We will be, by the end of the year, the goal is to have a public search API that is way more feature-rich than what we even offer in the application today, using a lot of the industry standard search capabilities that people are starting to expect when they look at search. And then solutions. The one main point here is that today when you export a solution, it's all or nothing. Well, it's just all, right? You have to take everything that's in my solution is in one bundle. And we don't have what I would really term a partial solution, or what we're calling it internally, solution segmentation, to where it's a set of components that you need in order to deploy maybe solution updates to existing services, right? So you've got your Giving Campaign solution deployed to production, and then I go and I add late and I add the days since donation. How about if I want to only deploy just the minimum amount of updates that it takes to get me up to that new version, giving you an easy tool to determine what that is, as well as to actually import that and have it all kind of managed through the life cycle, getting a little bit more solution life cycle-y versus just kind of you basically take it all and import it all. Because one of the more common concerns that we see is that it takes forever for me to import my solution when I'm importing it into a system, because it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now we're making it so that you don't have to worry about that size as much, and that it can still be really big, but you don't need to import the entire thing because the entire thing hasn't changed, let's say, when you're doing a point release. And so that's it for today. So I thank you. Go out on Twitter. If you have questions, you can submit with a hashtag MSIgnite and BRK2309. That's our session number here. If you have follow-up questions that we just don't happen to get to today, feel free to go out there and ask them. Luis, did you have any other final thoughts that you want to touch on?
You did an amazing job. No, you did it all, man.
All right.
Thank you for joining, guys. Enjoy your conference.